Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Field Service webinar sponsored by Hitachi Solutions, Going from Reaction to Prediction with the Right IoT Data Analysis. Thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to bring your attention to the console in front of you. All of the windows you see can be repositioned, maximized, or minimized to fit the device you're using to connect with us today. If you accidentally minimize a window, don't worry. Just pop into the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to bring it back up. On that same toolbar, you'll find the Resource Center. In that center, you can access documents related to this webinar content as well as important info about the upcoming Field Service event happening in Amelia Island, August 19th to 21st, where Hitachi will actually be at booth number 305, so be sure to check them out. Download the agenda or the attendee list. If you like what you see, email us at webinar@wbresearch.com to find out how to register. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Hitachi Solutions' Michael Mendoza, the Field Practice Lead, and Beth Barnes, Hitachi's U.S. Service Delivery Lead. We're going to try and save some time at the end of today's discussion for an audience Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions for Michael and Beth at any time during this presentation using the Q&A portal on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Michael. Take it away.
That's great. Thank you, Lena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, from wherever you may be joining us today. As Lena mentioned, I am the Field Service Practice Lead. We are very thankful that you decided to spend some time with us, talk about how companies are transitioning from more of a reactive service model to more of a predictive model, getting into more insights and analysis. Today, we're going to be focusing in on a couple of, key areas of moving to an outcome-based model. But in terms of just introducing myself real quick, as mentioned, I'm the Field Service Practice Lead. Our focus really is around, helping our customers move from, kind of more traditional field service models, moving from more of a reactive model to kind of introducing more insights and analysis and moving more into a reactive and from a reactive to a more predictive service model. That's myself. With me today is Beth. Beth, if you could just introduce yourself super quick, we can get going.
Yep, sure. Beth Barnes, Client Service Principal. I'm focused in the delivery area within the Hitachi Solutions organization and working on delivering things like analytics and working with the streaming data and various other sources when you want to incorporate that into your processes. And so thank you for having us today.
And I think what you're all going to see very quickly, very soon, is that Beth is really the talent here around, what is actually the right analysis, what are the things that we're seeing in the market today. So I'm very pleased that Beth was able to join us today. It's actually important to note that what you're seeing today is actually part of a series of webinars that we've been giving. If you haven't checked out the first one, it's really more around understanding the foundation and connectivity, right? So building blocks, and then what does it take to kind of connect the equipment? Some are smart equipment, some are not so smart. Understanding kind of where you can ensure that you're able to connect the dots, make sure the connectedness and the synchronization of that data, orchestrating that information, normalizing that information, all the steps that you kind of need to take and understand how to kind of make that connected layer in your organization start to bring you data. All of that is we covered in phase one. We're going to cover some of those concepts just to build on them, but we encourage you and invite you to check out that link if you haven't seen that yet. Our focus today will really be on, once we get all that information and we get all that data, how do we begin to kind of collect that and begin to kind of sift through that so we can kind of think about, okay, well, what kind of insights am I getting? Is this the right insight? Am I reading this correctly? Am I, misinterpreting this data? Is this really a good? Is this really a bad? Or is it somewhere in the middle? So how do you kind of take this information, this immense amount of information that you're going to have, and how do you begin to try and make sense and move this into more this insight? this kind of leads to kind of what we really hope you're going to be able to take away today is understand obviously the right data sources and connections needed for predictive maintenance. But assuming that that's something that you've already kind of established or pretty well on your way to understanding, how do you then understand, sift through that information and then get into more root cause analysis? And really important here is how do you apply the predictions and the problems and apply the right analysis to get to the right resolution steps. We're going to use a lot of our examples with customers, right? So we live this every day. So we have a bunch of insight, and we see a lot of patterns happening with respect to, what are the kind of key challenges most customers face. And that's really why Beth is here to kind of give us that insight. What are the key challenges? What are the kind of things that we see over and over and over and over again that customers are doing, both right and wrong, right? To kind of, hopefully that gives you a sense of, these are the paths and these are the kind of key steps and key success criteria that you kind of need to see along the way to hopefully make sure and give you a sense of, am I headed in the right direction? Just a quick thing, and this will be very, very quick around kind of where we're coming from, the lens in which we're looking at this insights and analytics perspective is obviously from a field service practitioner perspective, right? So we have 15,000 field service users worldwide. We have been in the field service as an implementation partner for Microsoft in Dynamics 365, Azure, IoT, the connected field service platforms. We've been in this space for about 16 plus years. We are global, and then our practices extend in obviously North America, Canada, and the U.S., as well as South America, as well as Europe and Asia. Our lens really, if you think about kind of how we come at this, we work with a lot of manufacturers, a lot of service providers, a lot of kind of verticals. But what we find, because of our exposure to the broad Microsoft platform and the broad use cases that a lot of our customers see, we kind of see both the big picture. So whether it be we're starting off from a Salesforce automation kind of context or a call center context, or we're getting deep into more equipment asset management or more the finance and operations phases or warehousing, optimization, and then obviously moving into field service as a practice, which is what I focus on, and then the connected field service, IoT, both from a smart device perspective, but also from bespoke kind of custom analytics projects that we do that basically help customers understand and unlock kind of the data from these intelligent devices. And of course, analytics is obviously a key part of that practice. So the value we feel that we bring is the fact that because we see this broad kind of spectrum of use cases, we understand exactly how, for example, an IoT project or an IoT initiative or a smart device or connected or getting more into from reactive to predictive service, how that fits into the overall kind of, DNA of how you're going to market. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that value chain, right? How do we get to more of a predict, and what are the kind of unlocking the insights? So this is probably just a simple way to put it, right? So, connecting your devices is awesome, right? They're great. They're fantastic. You need to do them. That's a foundational platform. But that's really just things, right? That's really just kind of, understanding your data, creating your data schema, creating your data hierarchy so that it can actually talk. It actually can provide you data. Now, turning that into insights, which is really kind of the focus of this conversation, is really kind of the next part of unlocking that value. And then hopefully by this time as well, you can see that creating this action from your insights, whereby you can take an action and then monitor how that affected both the insights as well as the market kind of motions that you're in. You can kind of see how you can turn this into a virtuous cycle, right? So the insights turns into more data, which then go ahead and informs your next set of actions. what we see over and over again is a lot of our customers really just kind of iterating through this, and then as your insights get better, your actions get better. As your actions get better, your insights get better, right? So you basically then are able to think about this in the context of now you're kind of that insight action model that you have is starting to become more predictive, right? So you're able to see consistency. You're able to begin to look at patterns, right? So now from here is where we see our customers start to kind of talk about new business models, right? So outcome as a service, right? Output as a service, right? This is when we begin to see where a lot of our customers start to unlock that value. A couple of quick examples, and one of the things that we're seeing a lot, of course, is the fact that customers of ours that we never thought would want to go down this road have been going down this road in droves. It's fantastic. So a couple of quick examples. So we have one of our customers manufactures jet engines. Now it's kind of moving more into an availability model. We have a customer that sells printers. Used to sell printers. We're seeing a lot of price competition from their competitors, and really in terms of differentiating themselves and setting themselves up for the next stages of their business. They're moving now, and this is an existing customer of ours. They're moving now to an outcome-based model, an output-based model. We'll actually talk about them in a minute. And then one company that we are actually helping right now. They make tractors, right? But increasingly, every single tractor that comes out of that factory is really a telemetry device, right? So now they're getting into helping farmers, right, be more effective with what tractor do they use for their particular farm for a particular time of year. So depending on the how big that customer is, they're basically then able to say, you know what, if you use 2 tractors instead of 3, you'll actually get more output out of that, and it'll be a lot more efficient from an operations standpoint, right? So we're seeing a lot of this activity within our customers, and it's pretty simple to see why, right? So both, if you think about it from a competitive risk or a competitive advantage perspective, stickiness, being closer to your customers, but also understanding that, really from a profitability perspective, from an outcome perspective, from a service model perspective, they're seeing those benefits even early on in this migration. Good example is Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce is, probably one of those prototypical examples that gets used a lot. Rolls-Royce happens to be our customers as well. The traditional service cycle, right, has always been, and this applies to every single manufacturer, right? Traditionally has been, you sell the piece of equipment, you make your initial kind of big revenue on that, and then for the first 4 or 5 years, that's kind of how that the piece of equipment, that revenue comes in. It could be on the lease plan, it could be whatever, right? And then shortly after that, you begin to see this service curve, right? And that's where, this could be services, of course, but parts and so on, right? Follows right along, right? So that's been kind of the service model that most of the companies have used, and that's kind of the revenue model. Rolls-Royce, back in, I don't know if anybody remembers, back, a few years ago, they were severely challenged in the market, specifically around reliability, uptime, cost of service, and cost to operate. Those are the kind of typical things and metrics that they compete on. So what they've done is they've moved to an outcome-based model, right? They said, okay, we're pioneering the total care product, right? Total care is basically uptime as a service, okay? We take care of it. You just let us know. We're going to monitor everything, right? So a couple of key things you'll notice here that has generated, right? They pioneered total care product around 2000 or so, right? And then up to 2018, what I really love about this is in their annual report, is it's very, very recent data, right? So, in around 2000-ish, mid 2000-ish, can't say that, 14% of large engine market share. Now they're about 35%, right? 10% of their engines were in the total care package. So this 90% was the traditional model. Now 90% of their engines are in the total care package. And then 150 of their, they were making about 150 annually engines in this package, but now they're at 550. And they're seeing, the benefit to the organization pretty clearly from moving to this model. So really impressive results, maybe even a smaller scale. And one of the things we like to talk about is, even at the small scale of, not the engines, because that's you can see that's a global operation. This is an existing customer of ours that is doing exactly the same thing, right? What they do is they fill in oil wells all over the country, right? And historically, what they had to do is they had to go ahead and drive their trucks around, and then the drivers would get out of the trucks, kick the tank, and from the sound of that, try and determine, okay, do you need a fill up or not? Okay, and then literally they would do their routes all over the country, and kick the tank, see if it needs something, and then show up to the next one, kick that tank, does it need something? You can imagine that how inefficient that is. So they actually moved to an IoT ecosystem, where basically then they're now remotely monitoring these tanks. And then we're helping them with the prediction algorithms that say, you know what, you're going to need to go see that in a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 days from now. So then that then automatically creates their schedule and their routes for them as they move forward. So they become moving into more of an always available on demand. One of the nice things about this is because they're able to do this, they're actually able to charge more for per liter, because it's a per liter model, because of the fact that they're going into always available contracts. So you're not holding on to you as an operator. If you're operating a gas station, you're not holding on to fuel for months because you don't know if it's going to be used or not. Right? You're not paying for that. You're only paying for what you need, and therefore they can charge more per liter of fuel or oil or whatever else they're delivering. It's just a really neat example of a company that's really changing the way to go to market. They're saying, hey, we're just going to make sure it's always full. You only pay us for what we put in, right? And because of that, there's less waste and less inventory is sitting there for a long time, their turnover is higher, then they're able to kind of charge more for that price. So we find that to be a really neat example. So
yeah, and on the opposite side of that, sorry, Michael. The opposite side of that, is the operational efficiencies they've gotten in terms of route optimization, resourcing, how many people do I actually need, how many trucks do I need, can I increase capacity of my fleet without investing in buying additional tankers or hiring additional people, because I'm able to better utilize the resources I have. So they've really gained in two places: one, the revenue and how they're able to charge, but also how they're able to become much more operationally efficient.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic. In fact, so Beth works with these guys every day, knows this company intimately, and that the operational efficiencies was something they actually thought about. That was kind of the first on the list of the things you were targeting for, right, Beth? But the new business model has been kind of something that they've recently kind of gone ahead and done and seen some success out of.
Yeah, I think they started with one kind of goal, moved on.
Yeah. So a couple of quick things. Since Beth is kind of adding to the story, and it's really important to see how kind of they're seeing that benefit here. It's really to kind of talk about, okay, that's great and all. I get it, makes sense, right? But what are the challenges? What are the issues I need to be aware of, and how do I traverse this from simply connecting to kind of getting, the right insights. So I can actually go ahead and even go down this road to begin thinking about an outcome-based model. And there's kind of, Beth, you were going to take it away for us here as we kind of move into the key challenges that most of our customers go through as we go through this. Go ahead, Beth.
Thanks, Michael. If you go to the next slide. So there's a lot of challenges when you start looking into this area. Some of them are data related. Some of them are just technology and infrastructure. Some of them relate to your organization and how am I going to change and adjust as I change my business model. The ever-evolving sort of platforms and how technology changes within this area is immense. The speed of change in terms of the technology that's available for me to do or to use within predictive analysis or for me to capture data or to analyze data is changing multiple times within the year, almost in a monthly, quarterly basis for sure. The other problem you run into is just the disparate technology. So if you may have a lot of different sources you're dealing with here in terms of the data. For some of these things where I want to look at a model or where I want to look at analytics, I've got to, look at information that might be coming from my ERP systems or my CRM systems. I may be looking at data that's coming for IoT. I now need to marry some of that information up. Oh, I may want to bring in weather data or something like that in terms of how that might impact some of the things I'm going to do in terms of my modeling or other other third-party data. And understanding how to bring a lot of that information together is definitely a challenge in kind of this in today's landscape. And working with companies, we find, and a lot of times maybe they've got a lot of data, but they don't necessarily know what to do with that data or how to organize it or what is good data in even some cases. So this is definitely, something we spend a lot of time working with companies and helping them figure out sort of that roadmap and where they can start with some of these challenges that they may see within the environment. And next slide, Michael. So one of the things that's very key when you're looking at the learnings and different things that can come from the process around, viewing or reviewing this information is sort of that analytics and how am I going to present this. For anyone who's been in like a data warehousing or BI space for many years, the MAD framework is a pretty common framework that most people know about: monitor, analyze, detail. So it's recognizing that I need to have different types of presentations, dashboards, KPIs for different levels of people and different roles within the organization. So most executives and even some middle management may be sort of at that monitor. I just need something at a high level to see if we're doing well or we're doing poorly against it. Analyze could be some of that middle management where I'm in there and I'm looking at certain things, but I need a little more detail. And then that detail is really where you're getting into those analysts, maybe your data scientists, your very specific operational people who are really needing to understand a lot of the variables, who need to go into maybe some of that specific census data or that specific work order history or something like that to really understand what's available and to make decisions based upon the data. So, when we think about how we're going to deliver some of this content, we usually use this as a framework when we go into our discussions. And over to the next slide, Michael. So let's say I've got a model and I'm running a linear regression upon some information. This is going to go through and show me where I've got variances, where I've got things that are above and beyond where I'm expecting in terms of my regression model. And so for my data scientist or maybe my industrial engineer who's in my group or someone who's very familiar with some different concepts, this may be a great way to do a presentation. But if I'm talking about presenting this to someone in a different operations group, this may not be the best way to present information about what's going on with something that's happening with data that's coming off of a DICE or something that from predictive analysis based upon historical and current data. that we suspect that you might need to go create or look at from a visibility standpoint. Something like, and let's go to the next slide here, Michael. So something like this, knowing the right way to interpret that data to your audience is very important. So something like this for maybe your field service personnel or even some of your operational people, where based upon what's coming off of a device, we know there's a specific failure, and based upon historical information about these devices and this type of failure, we've got a prediction that says, here's the recommended parts or the recommended service for this particular failure that we're seeing. So having something like this is much friendlier for an average person than looking at another type of model that really just says, hey, we're predicting a failure. Something like this is predicting a failure or is saying that there's a failure and recommendations on what you might want to do to process that is really a much better presentation mode for that. And even to that point, if you go to the next slide, maybe what you're looking at doing.
One more thing. One more thing too, just because this model is also what we're seeing quite a bit around our customers that are moving more to the outcome model. I referred to a company making printers earlier. This is exactly kind of the same model in which they're using. So they're basically going ahead and looking to use our analytics, our predictions and learnings to then understand kind of how consumables, when is a toner or when an ink block, even paper, right, is going to be consumed, right? And then from there, and of course, break fix and trouble parts consumption as well as parts breakdowns, then they're able to use prediction to say, okay, when is the consumables going to need to be refilled? When is the parts going to break? Or when is the printer itself going to need to be replaced? And through that, they're able to then move into more of this consumption as a service. They go, we're going to guarantee that you can get 2,000 pages per month, right, coming out of floor A in section B, right? And we're going to take care of that equipment. It's ours, and then we're going to move equipment around as we see fit based on your consumption model, right? So this is exactly kind of the same type of scenario in which they're basically using analytics to predict and learn and then understand in advance what's going to happen with that piece of equipment. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things you may want to think about in terms of how you utilize analytics is actually sort of embedding it into your processes and your workflow. So, maybe I'm in my application and I want to have a window pop up so that for a particular device I can see, hey, I want to see this compared to what's going on in the given building or a given floor. What am I seeing for the readings that's coming off of that? And really kind of including this into your workflow that you might have from your CRM or your ERP application, and really kind of ingraining that into your solution. So it could be from an analytics. Another scenario here could be actually I'm taking action based upon some of the data that I'm entering the system. I could use things like models that I've built over historical data to return sort of a predictive score back to my person that's maybe doing some data entry or doing some information in my ERP or CRM system that might then trigger certain other actions for that account that I'm working at, or for that particular work order that I might be processing, or that particular sales order. So there's a lot of different things where you can now start to embed both analytics and some of these models into these processes, in a variety of ways here. And if we go on. So one of the major pain points or major areas of risk when it comes to working with your data to do any type of AI or other type of predictive models is around data quality. Not all data is created equal, and there's a lot of opportunity with the data. Michael always laughs at me when I talk about this, that based upon the data that you have available that you're pushing into your model, you can really get different results. So the data quality available for that information you have is essential. There are, definitely a lot of instances out there where you'll see a lot of things touted about, we'll be able to use this technology to solve this problem. And then a few months later, maybe you hear, well, it didn't succeed. Well, most often it comes down to data availability and data quality. If you don't have reliable data, then you're not really able to predict the values. You're going to really get your results will be skewed. So I've seen this before. So we'll be looking at something, and maybe we've got, and it's not just your IoT data that may be coming in from your sensors. You're combining this with other data. I might be combining this with historical work order. I might be combining this with information master data about my customer or that account or that product. And I've seen this before where you'll be going through the models and you're like, okay, well, this just doesn't make sense, and you'll be talking to the business and they'll have a certain bias about the data, and we'll dig into it and it's like, well, wait, no, you've been capturing this data in a way where it's not at the right granular level, or it's not at the right time series, or maybe someone has been manually capturing numbers and keying them into a system and they've completely written down the numbers wrong or entered the data incorrectly, and it's really skewed the results of what's been able to come out. So this is typically an area where we spend a lot of time with customers going through and figuring out, what is good data? What do we really have to work with? How can we improve it so that, well, maybe we're not able to model this completely today, we can in the future. And usually this is an area where we find a lot of process improvement within the organizations in terms of what we're working with and how we're getting them to that next phase of visibility into their information and working with what they have. And the next slide. And so this gets a little bit more into that overall process that's involved with when you're looking at AI models and kind of going through it. And one of the most critical steps in this phase is where I talk about step one and step two, getting data, cleaning and preparing, and manipulating data. Quite often, this tends to be much more time-consuming than everything else in the entire process, because you're finding out what are those sources of data, how can I get to them, are they consistent with other sources of information that I want to do, how can I prepare them when we do find that the data quality is less than spectacular for what we need to do. Because getting that clean data is very important in terms of what we call training your model. You're going to want to have that model based upon some type of historical data to predict out the results and then kind of compare that and test it. And this is an ongoing process. So one of the things I definitely want to point out to people is that you should not treat this process as sort of a one and done. You should always have this feedback loop. You should be looking at certain things, because in the end what you're wanting to do is take action based upon some of the recommendations or some of the findings that are coming out of this. But you want to take action based upon some, additional knowledge, insight from those people in the business or within the organization who really can make sense of maybe what's coming out of that process. And so next slide, Michael. And to that point, as I was just saying, it's very important to really, when you go into this, knowing what you're trying to predict. I may not know completely what I'm going to get from my output or where this is going to go, but don't do this just as a science experiment. A lot of times I'll go into companies and they're like, oh, well, this is really cool, we want to try it. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your use case? Well, what do you mean? Well, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to improve? Are we trying to improve something on operational efficiency? Are we trying to produce a better product? Are we trying to, make something better from standpoint of our internal operations on how we deliver, cut down, time, change our model? What are we trying to do? So it's very important to go into that knowing what you want to do. You may not know exactly or how you're going to do it, but at least, something along those lines. And then it's also important to understand, to measure, what is good, what is bad, how do I define success and failure. I would say failure is not necessarily bad because you learn so much from it. So it's very important here to think about those things. Have a plan for reviewing the results. Have the right resources involved. A lot of times I'll go in and we'll be reading models, and I'm like, well, wait, don't we need to understand what we're doing from an actual operations, how we're going to be implementing these recommendations. So we need to have the people that might be in the line of business who've got maybe insight that other people don't have into the discussion. Understand the grain of data and try to work with some historical data if you can. And then over to our next slide. So in today's discussion, we've really been focused on this area that's kind of highlighted within the diagram. We've really been focused on sort of that data management and that actionable insights piece. And within the Microsoft ecosystem, there are a lot of different products that can enable this, a lot of different things that can really enable that you as an organization to take advantage of this. And this is one of those areas where it's constantly changing. I haven't had a chance to update this slide with Michael, but now we have some things available within Databricks Streams that could replace certain things around Stream Analytics. There's some additional things within ML that have just recently become available that further enhance or kind of give more of that line of business person some insight into certain things from a modeling standpoint. So this is an ever-evolving area where we spend a lot of time making sure that we understand that technology so that we can then come in and help your organization understand how to deploy that. And then the next slide, Michael. So some of the things, and we've discussed this a little bit in terms of some of the comments we've made kind of up to this point. If you're moving from that data to the insight, some of the things that you want to understand is making sure you've got an alignment within your organization, especially from an executive level, that this is really important, that this process is very important. Don't start saying that I'm going to take 25 years worth of data and I'm going to go through and analyze it, and I'm going to analyze this for every product that I have within my line of business. Start with something that's very manageable, where you've got some specific milestones and you can know you have defined ways of measuring success for it. You want to start with that before you kind of go off and expand this to a larger part of the business or a larger subset of your product mix or whatever. Definitely be aware of the impacts of data quality and the results and what you're going to do based upon what you see. And then have plans for reviewing those results and adapting your models and your analysis based upon things. Things change over time. So it's important that you also consider this in the data that you're presenting and in the models and how they're running. And in many cases, back to the point that Michael mentioned earlier with the one oil company we mentioned, a lot of times this is not just a technology change, it's very much a culture change. And you're going to be looking at changing the way people operate, the way you work with your customers. So there's a lot of things that you need to think about outside of just the technology when you're looking through this. And next slide, Michael. So this is a slide for any of you who've been on previous presentations. You may have seen this before. This is our approach in terms of how you can start small. This is an offering that we have where we really come in and we do some discovery sessions with you on understanding, do you have sensors where we can start capturing data? Do you need to install sensors? What is a good use case? What is something that's very attainable within a short window here that we can work with? Do we have historical data maybe that we can work with? Then we're going to start applying machine learning to understand certain things around predictive maintenance and indicators that we can see with that. Then we're going to be looking at these points and understand where we can have insight into the business. How can we improve operations? How can we improve customer satisfaction? How can we improve revenues? And going through that to come up with a final study for something. Typically, these projects are very small, 30, 60, 90 days, like we talked about before, but it's really kind of coming in and understanding where you are as an organization. Maybe you have data and you just need help understanding that data and presenting that data. Or maybe you need help all the way back to getting that sensor data and incorporating it in. But this is just a roadmap that we follow in terms of working with you on getting a very defined scope to show value and show value quickly, or to fail quickly if the results are not as expected, or if you have data quality problems, or this isn't the right use case. And back to you, Michael.
Sure thing. So, Beth, thank you so much. I mean, I think for the entire audience, myself included, I think one thing we'll see right away that there's a lot to unpack in this area, right? There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of experience that people like our folks like Beth bring. There's a lot of things that you get into. You start asking a question, you think you're going to get an answer. In fact, you get a different answer that leads to a different question. Right. So understanding kind of where you are in that roadmap is super critical. The summary here is really just to kind of hopefully leave you with a few things. Understand the value chain really becomes from things to insights to action. Connecting the things has value because then that gives you the ability to monitor, right? But moving that into an insight, but then moving that into the correct insight so that then you can create some actions that you can reliably or, confidently again go ahead and test in the market and then move back to further insights, right? One of the things we see quite a bit, and this is back to what Beth mentioned as well about the culture change, we find that having the insights both from obviously analytics insights, but having the insights of your team guiding and working with your data has been absolutely, valuable in moving from that, insights to action and then furthering your insights and then, training your actions even more. Just a quick, review, I guess, showing you again the landscape in which we can help from edge devices, connecting your sensors, defining the schema by which your equipment is going to communicate, through understanding kind of, streaming that down to insights, and then hopefully from there moving that into more action, and then basically kind of, using that as your journey so that you can get into more that innovation stage where you can say, okay, I'm going to try out some new business models. I'm going to try out, some new revenue models. Let's see where we go from here. But setting yourself up just to go there, right, is really dependent on you basically doing all the right things prior. So then your simulations, your predictions become, something that you can rely on. One of the things that is really important too, and I actually forgot, I was going to mention this in the beginning. One of the things that we were recently awarded as a Field Service Partner of the Year award by Microsoft, and really we feel that that's really because we really respect that step 1, 2, and 3, meaning you start with connectivity, understanding that correctly, then you move that into an insight, but applying the right practices for that, and then also recognizing that culture is vital to success, right, in any change within an organization. So all of these are important factors in really delivering success, right? Here, really, this is just a quick summary around kind of where we feel we can help, how we feel we can help, the value of moving more to a connected equipment, a connected service, more of a predictive model. We can help at all parts of that journey, and we're happy to help there. So that's kind of just to summarize kind of where we are, and I'm going to hand it back to Lena for questions at this point so that we can go ahead and answer them.
Hi, yes. So we actually have 2 questions from the audience as of right now. And the first question would be, how do I determine the ROI or business case for my company based on the results of the analytics or models that I'm seeing with our data?
It's a great question. Beth, you want to get us started on that, and then I can add.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So there's no one single answer to this, as Michael kind of mentioned just a few moments ago. Really, you have to figure out, we have to understand, where are you within your industry? What are your goals? What are strategic goals? And then we want to look at, for the data that we've got available, where can we find value? Is it in increasing some operational efficiencies, which is going to decrease my cost? Is it changing my model, my delivery model, so that I can change my billings and my revenue? So that's really the first step. And kind of like on that journey that we talked about where we come in and do that discovery stop with you, it's very important to sit down early on and kind of define where we're going to be able to find the gap value. A lot of times we're helping lead you through that discussion because you may not recognize that there is an area for improvement. So usually that's the first step, is figuring out, well, are we looking at both things, revenue, operations, customer sat, or are we trying to focus in one area where we have a specific pain point, we know that today, and we need to find a better way to have analytics and preventative maintenance in the specific area. Michael, any other thoughts there?
No, I think that's great. I think the proving out, and I'm going to harken back to the same Rolls-Royce example. They chose a specific line of engines to start with. Not every engine, not the marine products, specific, but because of market, market kind of forces, their position in the market. So, that really just speaks to understand the focus area, right? So when you talk about ROI, why are we focusing in on a particular product, or why are we focusing in on a particular, manufacturing line, or why are we focusing in on a particular, plant, right, for IoT, right? So begin to kind of, even at that initial stages of what are we, what ROI are we getting, it's important to understand choosing the right area within the business, your most pressing challenges, to try and prove out that ROI.
And then we actually have another question, and this second question is, how do we make sure our data is secure during the process?
That's a great question. Beth, you want to start with that one?
Yeah. If we're looking at something, obviously, like using the Azure ecosystem, the Azure ecosystem, that data is inside your tenant. You are the owner of that data. There are a lot of checks and balances and a lot of things that can be put in place from a security standpoint to make sure that the data that we're putting into Azure is secure and that we know exactly who's accessing it and what's happening with it while we're working with it. So there's a lot of different things within the technology that can help provide, that security and can provide that, comfort to you that your data is secure during this process.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things, like within the Azure Data Lake, that the blob storage, that data is stored in an encrypted manner. So there's different things like that, like in the ecosystem where data is actually being stored and it's encrypted. So there's a lot of things like that are available in technology to help you as well.
No, that's perfect. That's actually kind of where I was going to go. Just choosing the right connectivity platform, choosing the right data management platform as well is vitally important. And understanding the platform that you're using for your data connectivity and your data encryption is going to be vital to that conversation.
And then Beth and Michael, if you guys wanted to leave our audience with any key takeaways, what would they be?
Beth, you want to start, and I'll just add to.
Some of the things we talked about before, start small. Start with a very specific use case where there's potential value. Don't be afraid to fail on the first one because you're going to learn a lot from that. And also, know that what you're trying to achieve. Like I said, if it's revenue or if it's operational efficiency, customer sat, whatever it might be. So this is, and don't, and be prepared that you may discover some things about your data and your data quality and your processes that you need to address before you can even implement some of these other things. That happens quite often. I've got that right now where some data is not being captured at the frequency that we need in order to have efficient model predictions. So now we're changing an operational process in order to be able to, better predict what's going on within the manufacturing process. Or the process in terms of predictive process for the what's coming off the sensors.
Yeah, and I think, the stakeholder engagement is important. Those are super vital points, or super important points. But I also see the ability to engage your stakeholders, engage your organization, and understand, your kind of internal expertise, and being able to reach out to them, engage, your experts, and as you go down this journey of understanding what your data is doing, what it's missing, what it's actually offering you in terms of insights, and test it with them and incorporate things like, gut instinct into that kind of just initial determination of, is this good data, is this not, is this kind of giving me what I need, right? And you'll find that just combining that, the internal knowledge that you have, as well as that data that you're surfacing and the new insights that you're getting from it, is going to be super valuable for you.
Well, thank you so much. That was a great final key takeaways. And we just wanted to say thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. If you submitted a question that we didn't get to, we'll follow up with you by email shortly. You can also look forward to receiving this presentation directly to your email inbox within 24 hours or so. So definitely keep a lookout for that. And finally, a huge thank you and round of applause to Beth and Michael. That was a great webinar. Fantastic job to you both. Please remember to leave feedback and suggestions for us in the survey at the close of this webinar. We'll use that feedback to guide us in producing upcoming webinar topics so we can keep giving you guys exactly the kind of content that you want to see. So with that, I'll bring this program to an end. On behalf of Hitachi Solutions and the WBR Insights team, we thank you for your time, and we also hope to see you at Field Service Amelia Island this Monday, where Hitachi will be at booth number 305. So have a great day, everyone.